In 10th place is the Coast Guard, on the surface a critical examination of the South Korean military as well as an exploration of psychological trauma, specifically PTSD, but on a deeper and broader level as well, an exploration of too many people's inability to let go of what they loved and what gave their lives meaning after it has all been torn from them as the result of a single foolish act. Since the two Koreas are still officially at war and the South Korean government and military are still, as far as I'm aware to this very day, afraid that their nation will be infiltrated by North Korean spies, the South Korean coastline is guarded by armed soldiers who have orders to shoot to kill anyone who sets foot on the coastline after sunset. So when a drunk and horny couple from a small fishing town near one Coast Guard base goes down to the beach at night, daring each other to go further, and finally having sex on the beach, one life is brutally and horrifically taken, and two others are utterly destroyed. Having seen her lover being shot repeatedly and blown apart by a hand grenade, unable to cope with the guilt of having essentially dared him to have sex with her there, Mi-young apparently suffers a full psychotic break, which causes her to regress into an almost infantile state, seeing the face of her lover in the faces of many of the other soldiers at the base, and thus leading her to being exploited by half of the soldiers in the unit, and at the same time having devoted his life to the Coast Guard and by extension to his love for his country, been utterly obsessed with doing his duty as a soldier and now unable to cope with the guilt of having murdered a civilian. Even after he's been discharged from the service on psychological grounds, Private Kang can't accept returning to civilian life, instead wearing his uniform all the time, hanging around outside of the base, still giving orders to his subordinates, and apparently even turning on his former comrades at the end. Having seen enough Kim Ki-Duk films to know how he blends reality with dreams, beliefs and perceptions, however, and remembering that this movie is an exploration of psychological trauma, in my humble opinion, the fact that only some of the soldiers ever see Private Kang when he is supposedly attacking them, and the wave-like effects as if they are seeing a mirage when they do, is a dead giveaway that at least some of the other members of his unit were suffering from PTSD as well, and thus experiencing hallucinations. As a matter of fact, for a split second before he blinks and convinces himself that no, it isn't real, one of the soldiers even thinks that he sees Private Kang laying in the bed next to his and smiling at him when he wakes up. So instead of Kang attacking them, given how the soldiers forced her to undergo a back alley abortion with no anaesthetic and leaving her to bleed, her brother was arrested for attempting to murder one of the soldiers after that, and how she laughed towards the end when all of the soldiers went chasing after what they thought was Private Kang only to find an empty uniform, I believe that even in her traumatised and regressive state, the attacks on the unit were Mi-young taking revenge for everything that the Coast Guard had done to her and to the people who she loved, perhaps a subtle jab by Kim Ki-Duk at the South Korean military in real life, who far too often abuse, exploit and even murder the people who they are supposedly there to protect. But regardless of what the actual truth may be regarding that part of the film though, speaking only for myself, while there was nothing wrong with it whatsoever, I believe that it was by far the weakest aspect of the movie, and to be honest, could have been cut without sacrificing anything at all, because as I say, the true heart and soul of the film was the destruction of Mi-young and Private Kang, and even though they hardly ever spoke a word to one another or spent more than a few moments in each other's company throughout the movie, the strange and disturbing yet unbreakable bond that they shared was hauntingly compelling. At various points throughout the film, the two of them staring into one another's broken souls, because in their own way, through their own foolish actions, they had each destroyed that which they had loved. Only someone who had been there and experienced that as well could ever truly have understood their pain, and no matter how deeply they each dove into denial, they would never be able to go back. To quote the English translation of the lyrics of the song which Private Kang sings both near the beginning of the movie and at the end, If that happy day could return, tracing back to that fading memory, if only I could express my feelings now, no matter how much I may regret, the past is already gone.